And we are back with a special guest. Now, normally, Preston and I, we don't do collaborations, but this time we have a special guest. I'll give you a hint as to who it is. He may or may not have played Jaime Lannister in Game of Thrones. May or may not have. Well, the answer is he didn't. It's Trey the Explainer. Hello, Trey.
Hello, guys. It's good to be here.
Trey, are you that good looking that you could play Jaime Lannister? And
apparently he is. We actually had this brief discussion a while ago, right, Trey?
I'm decent looking. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Like the few times that I've posted, I haven't showed my face, but I posted like my body or whatever. That sounds weird. Like pictures of me from like the neck down, and people are like, "Whoa, you're hot," or something like that.
Oh gosh, that would be the worst for me, man. They'd be like, "Oh my gosh, what's the frog arms and belly?"
Oh no,
oh my chain. That would be me.
Trey and I belong to the prestigious YouTube club of people who don't show their face but have a nice voice. That's right, Trey. We're part of that club. Normally we don't do collaborations because oftentimes it is hard to find people who mesh well with us on a personal level, and getting the timing right for the recordings, especially with the different time zones, is fairly difficult. But this is one of those rare moments where everything just kind of clicked well into place. But the slight difference here, as opposed to the normal collaborations we've usually do or done in the past, is that Trey doesn't really cover Ice and Fire content. So for the people who may not be familiar with you, tell them what you do over on your channel.
Yeah. So I do. So here's funny. My YouTube channel originally started out where I did like Minecraft videos or something like that. So it's, like, it's really bad. But over time,
so at first you were a millionaire, and then you decided. Then after you retired, you went away from Minecraft videos.
I gave it up. All those videos are gone. They're burned. They're on like a hard drive somewhere at my parents' house, probably collecting dust. But now I do. So I do like a wide range of like topics, like but my main focus is like archaeology and like history kind of focused stuff, real world history, and just anything that's kind of interested to me. I do branch out into like biology and evolution and paleontology. I just kind of do whatever interests me at the time.
And you are an avid Ice and Fire fan.
Yes, I am a very huge fan. I've wasted so much of my life in this community, theorizing and stuff.
So, who do you think wrote the pink letter?
Okay. I'd say it's Stannis. I think it's Stannis trying to get Jon to help him out.
Okay. It's a good guess. I'm still in the Mance camp after all of these years. I mean, I understand that Stannis is a great second guess, but I'm still in the Mance camp. The honeyed locusts. Who do you think poisoned the honeyed locusts?
The honeyed locusts. I know that I saw like your video a while ago where it's House. Oh, what is that? The stupid Giscari house.
House Paul.
House Paul. Yeah. But I don't think it's his dar. That's too it's too Barristan believes it, which means he's an idiot. So it's not that.
He knows. He knows.
Is it so maybe Skahaz? Maybe Skahaz did it.
Oh, that's a pretty good guess. Yeah. All right. Yeah, my guess, of course, is House Paul focusing on getting a strong bell wasp. But yeah, Carmine, what were your guesses? Your guesses are Joe Rogan and
the one time. Now he's bust balls forever. One time.
You don't understand. Like in my last stream, I got so much shit for trashing Joe Rogan and Elon Musk. There's so many stands out there.
Yes, let's stand for billionaires and millionaires. But no, Trey, thanks for joining us. This came about because Preston was trying to figure out who he'd want to hop on in the live stream one night, and he floated the idea of doing something with you, which was a shock for me because he normally is very lukewarm on doing anything with almost anyone. But he mentioned you, and I said, oh, yeah, Trey, I know him. Like, I think I commented on one of your videos a few years ago, and you replied back, and I didn't even realize you followed me on Twitter, and clearly you listened to the podcast and all that, and ever since then, we've been pretty friendly.
Yeah.
But like I said, I was very surprised Preston wanted to have someone on, and luckily, we've been acquainted for a few years now, so I was determined to make it happen.
Well, I've seen a few of Trey's videos, not even realizing kind of who it was, and then every once in a while, Trey will post a comment, and it causes quite a ruckus in the comment section because people are like, "What the hell is Trey the Explainer doing here?" Which is a weird thing about being like a pseudo, not even YouTube celebrity is that when you appear other places or you comment on another video, it's like 100% chance that somebody's going to be like, oh my God, what are you doing here? Yeah. So like, if I'm like watching somebody's live stream, it could be anybody. Like I was watching Pat Finnerty, who's this incredible musician guy out of Philadelphia who does these hilarious like videos. It has nothing to do with Ice and Fire. Has nothing. It's not even like geek culture. It's all music. And like I post something and like 3 people are like, what's Preston Jacobs doing here? Love your videos, bro. And you're like, I know, but I thought we were talking about Pat, like, but this kind of, so that kind of happens every time Trey posts in the comments. Everybody's like, what's Trey the Explainer doing here?
I'm a fan. I just like your videos, like your style, I like just like how your method of thinking with this book series. It's fun.
The method of thinking of being nuts. But I know that Trey is super into archaeology, and archaeology is a funny field because I think like before I started reading history and understanding archaeology, and keep in mind that my brother-in-law is an archaeologist and my sister is a anthropologist. And
wow.
They kind of changed my perspective on things. But I think when you're young and you think the word history, you think, well, if I actually went back in time, these are the things that actually happened. And that history is this recording of stuff that happened. And then kind of later you realize that no, everybody's really biased and their narratives of what happened are completely have that scope. And so archaeology is a bit more interesting because you're pulling things out of the ground that are more tangible and real and often contradict what history says. So like, for instance, if you were going to write your own history of your life, you'd probably not include what you had for breakfast or all of the bad things about your life. But if somebody went through your trash, they're going to have a completely different perspective on who you were. And in some ways, a very more real perspective than your biased history,
Yeah.
And so I think about that a lot with Ice and Fire because fans, are really into the legends and are really into like, the Azor Ahai legend says this and this and this. But then the stuff around them, like physically in the universe, says something else. And you kind of bring up like, well, this physically doesn't mesh with that legend, and people go, "Oh, you're thinking too much into it." Like the George R.R. Martin wasn't thinking about that, but I kind of think George R.R. Martin was.
I think he exactly thinks about that. Like if the one thing that really sticks out to me is when he speaks through his self-insert, Sam. Like Sam's a self-insert, and he talks about like there's one passage, I think it's in Feast for Crows maybe, where he talks about how like
Samuel 1, A Feast for Crows.
Where he talks about where none of the Maester histories or the sort of oral legends make any sense because like they have like stories about people living for hundreds of years and nights when they have like anachronisms where there's nights when there weren't nights yet, like the Andal religion wasn't there, and I feel like he's like that's an intentional dig at some of the stuff in our world where there's stuff like that in our world. If like you take like the Bible has the patriarchs like living literally like close to like 1,000 years, and odds are that probably didn't happen. Or there's like other
in fact, one of the big Bible ones that is really hard for people to swallow is that in archaeology, so there's lots of evidence of the divided kingdom period of Israel and Judea, but there's hardly any archaeological evidence, if any at all, of a united Israel. Are you familiar with this, Trey?
Yeah. That like there was like the history in like the Old Testament's very revisionist. Like where it even seems like the older religion of Israel was polytheistic, like there were multiple gods instead of one singular one.
Yeah, it's weird how everything is backwards, right? Like we kind of know from an atheist perspective or a non-religious perspective, I should say, that the progression of humanity went from polytheist to towards monotheism, with something in between where you're kind of you recognize that other gods exist, but you only worship one, you know. But the Bible always portrays it the other way, that they were monotheistic, but then they were seduced by polytheism, you know, and fell into polytheism, you know.
Yeah, it makes even less sense when like there's in the stories there God's like talking to people directly. Like I feel like people wouldn't revert to polytheism in this universe with all that sort of event, like where there's like the Tower of Babel and the Noah's flood and stuff where things actually happen. It's kind of funny. Yeah.
Right. There's so much evidence, and like what's so seductive about polytheism? For listeners who don't know what we're talking about, like, so there was a period around 1100 BC called where you had the Great Cataclysm. The world was essentially ruled by Hittites and Egyptians. And after the Great Cataclysm, the Hittite Empire collapses and the Egyptian Empire recedes and shrinks. And this opens up the Holy Land, you know, what we now know today as Israel and Jordan. And in that area, these Semitic tribes kind of came out, and these Semitic kingdoms came about. You had Judea, Israel, Ammon, Moab, and Edom, you know, and the narrative in the Bible says that, oh, there's this united kingdom of Israel, and then they split up because the northern part like was seduced by polytheism, but the unified kingdom everybody kind of knows in history as like David, Solomon, and Saul, like as like the three kings. But there's no archaeological evidence really of them existing.
I think the only evidence that's been found is this stone slab that was made a huge deal of, and it mentions the House of David at one point or something like that. And that's all we have. It's like a thing that's written like probably like 100 or so more years removed from King David, and people say like this is like the earliest evidence that like people referred to David as like a historical figure.
Yeah, and it's not even David's full name. It's like the House of DV, because there's no vowels in written Hebrew. So it's like DV, and then like the last D is like not even.
Oh, they're reading into it. Oh, I didn't know that. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I think you're talking about the mesh of steel.
Yeah.
He was a Moabite king where the Bible says that he got his butt kicked, but his steel actually says says that I won. So it's like kind of confirms the Bible and contradicts the Bible at the same time.
There's like another like archaeology wise, I remember a story came out where they talked about when camel domestication was used in specific areas in the Near East, and they found that it doesn't actually match up with the Bible. Like the Bible says like Abraham was using camels or something, but they found that camels weren't domesticated in that region at that time. So it shows that the book was written probably in the future, and they were projecting their ideas into the past.
Time-traveling Bran. That's fascinating.
Time-traveling camels. Well, and yeah, you're right. Like where like history, it's more like eyewitness investigation. It's like you get all these sources. Typically, you only have like a limited number, and you have to sort of rely on what they say and parse out what's biased, what's real, what was just sort of made up to make somebody look bad after the fact.
Yeah, absolutely. The things being out of time, like taking it to Ice and Fire, like, you know, we learn this whole tale of the Andal invasion and the Andals bringing in the Iron Age to Westeros. Supposedly the first men were in the Bronze Age, but then we also have the story about the Starks putting iron swords on their tombs, and you have the Ironborn on the Iron Islands. You know, like what? Like, you think that the Ironborn on the Iron Islands would be a big contradiction of against like Bronze Age kind of situation.
I never actually thought about it. That's a very good point, that the Ironborn didn't have iron, but they still named themselves after it.
Right? Supposedly, right.
Oh, that's
but this also gets into like how much because you're right, like history gets changed, like the Bible being an obvious one, but the even later when we talk about monks copying over Roman history or Greek history, or even Beowulf. I don't know if you ever read Beowulf in school, but it's kind of funny because they just have all these inserted, and I do this in the name of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
You're like, that, how does that fit? You know, and they're like, well, this was copied over by some monks. And you're like, oh, okay. But this kind of relates to like the Maester conspiracy. Like if there is a conspiracy, like how much are the Maesters like changing history?
Yeah. Yeah, because the thing is that literacy, I know that during the Roman period at like max, like male literacy was no bigger than like 30%. And there's a huge...
Higher than I thought.
I know, it's higher than I thought, but here's the thing, here's the catch, is that there was a big difference in like what that counts as literacy. It seems that most people were like signature literate, like where they could just essentially just sign their signature and that's it. But in like there was only a very, very small amount of the population that could actually write books. And that's when like you get into like who like wrote like the New Testament. Like we don't really know who they were. But like they had to have been a very small segment of the population. And it rules out a lot of like Jesus' disciples, because it's often like people say that like Jesus' disciples are the ones that wrote the Gospels, but it doesn't seem like they actually would have been, because it would be a very elite segment of society that could have actually written them. And these scribes would have been in like control of a lot of the texts, where they could change them and alter them, and nobody could really question it.
And often we don't think about it with English because English and is fairly similar, the spoken to the written, but a lot of languages don't have written languages. And so if you want to learn written language, you have to learn a completely different language, you know? Like I know that like you would have to learn Latin or Greek or Aramaic, even though you spoke something completely different. Like if you're familiar with like people that speak, like say you speak Jordanian Arabic, there's no written Jordanian Arabic. No one's ever thought about how those sounds and those vowels would be put down on paper. There's modern standard Arabic, but you know, Jordanian Amiya is just kind of spoken. But that is something I wonder about is do the Maesters write in the same language as everybody speaks? Like, is written common tongue the same as...
Well, that's the problem with A Song of Ice and Fire, is that, like, the languages are way, way too simplified. Like, where there's one tongue, and I think there's, like, High Valerian.
It's one thing that he really screwed up. There's no reason why all of Westeros would be speaking the same language.
Yeah. I guess it's for simplicity's sake, but it's ridiculous. Especially when you consider that they've been existing for literally thousands of years, like, and their language doesn't change that much.
Right, and you know, you need a national campaign and centralized schooling in order to kind of force everyone to speak the same language. Like, you could maybe suppose that the Faith of the Seven did that, but the North doesn't have the Faith of the Seven, so there's no reason that they should be speaking
or Beyond the Wall. I always thought it was weird that Beyond the Wall they spoke the common tongue. Like, I guess the Thin spoke the old tongue, but like the majority of them speak the common tongue. You're like, what?
Yeah, you're right. That makes no sense. Like, I could understand a trader or something, but if you're not trading and you're just living in a village like Egret, like why would Egret be speaking the common tongue?
Doesn't make any sense. Oh, George.
Yeah, you're right. Oh, George.
I'm ruining
go
George's
back
book.
and rewrite the whole thing. Oh, man.
It's fun, like, when you know history and you can look at George's stuff, because you can tell that he really, really loves it. Like, he's a huge nerd. Like, because you'll read it. So when I read it sometimes, and I'll go like, oh my gosh, he literally just took this from like a Herodotus or the Iliad or something like that.
Oh, really? Like which stories are you thinking about?
With the one thing that really stuck out to me is with Melisandre burning. Oh God, who the Axel Florent maybe or
yeah,
the other one.
Alistair Florent. Yeah.
And like they gave him favorable winds to the north. Like that's like almost taken straight from the Iliad with oh gosh, I'm forgetting the king's name. Not Menelaus. Agamemnon killing his sacrificing his own daughter for the winds.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that's my interpretation. I might be looking into it too much.
No, I think you're right on. I haven't read the the Iliad and the Odyssey since Latin class in middle school, so I'm forgetting all the events.
Well, another one I picked out was like Loris and Renly. I think might be like a subtle jab at Achilles and Patroclus.
Oh, right.
Where they're like gay warrior lovers. Yeah. And one that really stuck out to me, so this was like, I don't know if I'm completely looking into this, but one like really cool one that I noticed is there's like a late, I think this is during the 3rd century crisis, there's a Roman emperor named Valerian, which made me think of, okay, Valerian, but like it might just be a coincidence. But he was the only Roman emperor captured alive during war, and he was captured by the Persians, and they the king of the Persians treated him like a slave, made him into a personal footstool, and then like eventually flayed him alive. And it made me think. God. It made me wonder. It made me think of Theon and Ramsay a lot.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
No, that definitely, rings true. So, yeah. Sometimes I wonder what I hit with, like what are coincidences, and then what you kind of what we read into.
Yeah.
But that one's pretty close. Like,
I know.
Like everyone having
flame was. I was like, okay, this seems similar.
Like in a lot of ancient literature, they talk about purple eyes being the most beautiful eyes. But it was one of those things I like brought up to, like when I met George, I brought up because it appeared in Plato's Republic that like purple eyes are clearly the most beautiful eyes in the world, and everyone knows this. And I brought this up to George, and he's like, I haven't read Plato's Republic since like I was 18. I was like, oh, okay.
Oh, dang.
I know.
I think he lies. I think he just straight up lies to people sometimes.
I do somewhat suspect that, like, oh, I wasn't really paying attention. Or the other thing that I had an interview with the guy who does the new Dune books, Kevin Anderson, and he brought up the point that sometimes you think about it when you write it, and then you forget about it.
Oh,
and
yeah.
so he said he often goes to cons and like people will come up to him and ask him about Star Wars books that he wrote way in like 20 years in the past, and he's like, I that might have been something I was thinking about. I just don't know. It's just the time has just passed. But I don't know. It's hard to say.
Yeah, especially when you consider that he's been writing this for like 30 years, something like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little different with George as it's one story, so you don't have other books to forget. Like, like Kevin J. Anderson, he's written like 50 books. So you're like, okay, I can understand. Or like Stephen King, I can understand why you might get stuff mixed up. But you don't have any other books. Like, this is it. You should really know your shit.
Oh my God. Well, like, yeah. You can definitely, like, at one point, I think there's like no other way. So like, another example that stuck out to me is when he describes like the Giscari religion, in the Temple of like the Graces, and he mentions that in Marine there's ones that, they're like temple prostitutes, I guess, and
the Red Graces.
Red Graces, and it's like that is like taken like almost the premise is taken from Herodotus, like in his description of Babylon. In Babylon, he said that. So Herodotus claims that in Babylon there was a practice where all women, regardless of like social class, had to go into this certain temple. I think he calls it Venus, but it's probably like some Babylonian deity. And they have to wait until someone chooses to, like a guy chooses to have sex with them, and then they're allowed to leave. And it's probably like a rumor that he read. Like, there's no archaeological evidence that this practice actually existed.
He's just trashing this other culture and making it seem like a foreign other with lax morality. Yeah, but Garris Drinkwater brings up that exact same story, right? In the Quentin chapters.
And you'll be reading, like, this is what happens to me. I've been reading, I'm like, he literally just transported this from ancient history. He'll borrow it. It's kind of cool.
With Gis, I thought it's really funny that he brings up the Carthaginian, the Romans salting the Carthaginian fields, but he has it in that the Valerians, turned their crops to ash, and that ruined Giscari society. And of course, like, people really believe this. Like the salting of the fields thing is like a regular thing that people mention and really believe about Carthage to this day, even though it makes no sense. Like, yeah, I can salt a field, and then after it rains, the field is fine. Like,
it's just gonna wash away.
It's gonna wash away. Well, like, and then literally, like, Carthage was like a booming city for hundreds of years after. Like, what?
It doesn't. Like, and do you want to hear? So I looked it up. When you mentioned this, I was like, actually, I've heard this myth so much. I want to look up when it's actually first mentioned. Do you want to know when it's actually first mentioned?
Yeah, when?
It's not ancient. The first mention of it is 1863.
What?
Yes, really? I was like, that is ridiculous. It is something some European writer, I don't know, English writer or something, like literally just made up. He literally made it up in the 1800s.
I think you probably need to do it like post-industrial, because if you made up that myth in ancient times, everybody's a farmer. So everybody'd be like, that makes no sense. Like, if you salt a field, nothing would happen. Like, it would wash away, like, immediately.
They'd be able to call it the bullshit of it.
Right, but now we're no longer farmers, and so we don't know, and we're like, I guess that sounds like that. But so one of the things I brought up is when I did the geology with Game of Thrones video was the fact that, okay, burning crops with dragons and destroying a society for hundreds of years makes no sense. Like, what really brought down Giscari society? And it's just, well, the Iron Age brought down Giscari society. They were a bronze-based society, and there's no need for bronze anymore. Probably like a disruption of the tin trade in the same way that the Sea Peoples disrupted the tin trade in the ancient world and brought the end to bronze, and brought, what really caused the downfall of the Middle East and Egypt. Was it really like a one-time war, or was it just like, economic reasons? I
know that the Bronze Age collapse, it's a very contentious subject for archaeologists. Where there's where there's like some that like really like stick to like one thing was the cause. Odds are it was just like a hodgepodge of stuff. Like there was like climate change, like there was a drought, and then the sea peoples, the amazing sea peoples came in.
The amazing sea peoples.
There's earthquakes around that time.
For the audience, like when we were talking about the Great Cataclysm and what caused the Hittite Empire to collapse and what caused the Egyptian Empire to rescind, people don't know if the Sea Peoples, which are this mysterious group of people that started attacking in the Mediterranean around this time, they don't know if the Sea Peoples were the cause or the result of these empires collapsing. Yeah. So, like, were they refugees and pirates, like, taking advantage of two empires that were in decline, or did these empires go into decline because of this rampaging group of pirates and raiders? And so it's kind of fascinating, but people kind of assume that because bronze needs tin, and tin kind of came from Western Europe, that if you had a bunch of war going on in the middle of the Mediterranean, the tin wouldn't be able to make it to where the copper was in Egypt and the Middle East, and you couldn't make bronze, and so everybody was forced to make iron or something. This is one of these theories, but yeah, it's very contentious. Like people, we're just laymen, but professionals scream about this stuff.
Did we know how the Iron Age was started in Planetos? Does he ever bring this up in like the World Book or anything?
He just says that the Andals invented iron and then brought invented steel and brought it with them when they did their invasion. Huh. But of course it doesn't really fit with like, well, do the Valerians use Valyrian steel? I mean, right. Some things make sense if you think like, okay, if the same thing happened, like all the coppers in Gis, and the Valyrians are rising and disrupting the tin trade, and tin can't get into Gis, then their society would collapse, and people would be forced to start using iron, start using steel. And he does kind of weirdly mention copper trade in A Dance with Dragons. Like Dany's like, oh, I can sell you copper, and everybody's like, what do we need copper for?
What the hell? Like, he actually does? Daenerys does that?
Yeah.
Is that to show that she's stupid? Like, nobody's using copper anymore.
Well, that was the thing. Yeah, no, it's in when Zaro Zoandaxis comes to visit.
Oh,
she's like, oh, what kind of things can I trade? Because we don't have slaves anymore to trade. And he's like, well, what do I want from here? And he's like, do you have olives? And she's like, well, all the olive trees got burned and they take like 10 years to grow. And he's like, okay, well, she's like, I got plenty of copper. And he's like, what? What am I going to do with copper? That's really funny.
Oh, Daenerys.
So my theory is that rather than it being dragons that destroyed Giscari society, that it was typical, like the collapse of the Bronze Age and the rise of Valyrians disrupting the tin trade that really like did it.
That's a really interesting point because I remember that there's like they say that there's multiple Giscari Valyrian wars, which is weird to me. It was always weird to me that there's several, and like when you have dragons, I feel like they could just defeat them in one go. Like it's kind of one-sided.
No, you're absolutely right. Like all of these wars are really difficult to visualize when you think about dragons. Like. Especially, I think when George started, it was sort of like, oh, the Dornish were such troublesome people that the Targaryens weren't able to conquer them, and then you kind of go, well, how is that possible? And I think he's just now kind of like putting in the details, like, oh, well, they had these like spears and scorpions and stuff like that, and the dragons couldn't fly over desert long enough without water and food. He came up with different ideas. But I don't know, it's still hard to visualize.
Right. Like when he talks about the Rhoynar Valerian wars too, where they're like using magic water spouts and stuff, it's like, I don't know how that would work. Like
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's tough when you've made an opponent so overly powered,
right,
with the equivalent of nuclear weapons to like how would anybody just like not fight them? Why wouldn't they have immediately conquered the world when you had dragons?
Because it not only makes you militarily superior, but it also gives you like easy transport. Like you can travel much easier.
Oh God, yeah. Thinking about that, like discovery, like trade, like you'd be discovering technology and products from around the world. So you'd have this booming economy with the best technology in the world, the best, armor, whatever. Yeah, you'd be killing it. It would be like when the Spanish and Portuguese like with their started dominating because of their navy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they should have had Westeros conquered like, well before that.
There might be a reason, right? Didn't they? Isn't it like a mystery why they didn't conquer beyond Dragonstone? It's like brought up a lot.
It is a big mystery. No one really has a good theory on it. There's some ideas that maybe like you need volcanic activity to hatch dragon eggs, and so the dragons didn't want to go further because there's weirdly no volcanic activity in Westeros other than Dragonstone. And then some people say maybe it's something to do with I don't know, that there was some treaty or something to do with the children of the, well, it doesn't even make sense with the children of the forest, or because they broke it when the Ironborn, Heron the Black, started taking over. Yeah, there's no reason. I don't.
Well, and then there's the High Tower of Old Town too. There's like weird theories about that, where the base of it might be Valyrian or something.
Yeah, there's all these like weird black oily stones that he's included in the World Book,
right?
Kind of hinting that there was some sort of ancient civilization that might have been more advanced than what we have today.
Yeah.
And so like people get pissed off at me because I'll be like, oh well, this oily stones, that's plastic, and the previous society was post-industrial and super advanced, and then people, and it's all post-apocalyptic, at this point, and people say, "Oh, Preston, you're crazy." It was just some weird ancient mystical, society that was just different. Like, okay, that was super into magic,
I think that's stupid because your videos convinced me to read a lot of George's older work. And like that's exactly what his older work does a ton, is that it's technology that's regressed and people don't really understand it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is I didn't come up with the idea. I just stole it from George,
Yeah, so there's examples like Storm's End. Storm's End is really weird with how Catelyn describes it. How like the stones are so well fit together that they're just like, it's almost like flat, I guess. I have to look back at what she actually says. And it seems like when I read it, it seems like how somebody in like ancient times would describe like a more modern piece of technology, like like concrete. Like I feel like that she's just trying to describe concrete, or like how Valerian's like molded stone and stuff.
Yeah, it does just seem like concrete, right? Like there's no chiseling. They just like they use their magic to mold stone. Like that does sound like cement and concrete to me. I've tried to figure out what Storm's End could be. Like the description of it is just so weird. It's utterly not of the fantasy world, and it's not really of our world either. Like it's this oval shaped smooth wall, and then this one single tower in the middle that's just kind of weird, this huge drum tower. And I was like, a hydroelectric plant or something? Like it doesn't really sound like a nuclear power plant. It doesn't really sound like anything that we have. So I was just kind of coming up with something like it's got those caves underground and water flows in.
Preston, was the oily black stones being plastic, was that yours? Was that your theory?
Yeah, that's my theory.
That's another one I've also noticed that kind of you always mention in some of your videos and some of the podcast episodes we've done that might be like ancient technology left on over, because what was one of your reasons? Because plastic doesn't degrade as easily over time?
Right, or at least a version of plastic wouldn't degrade over time. And maybe our plastic would, but you got to think of some sort of like what would feel oily. What kind of stones are oily? Plastic kind of feels oily, but I don't know. Like what would last 10,000 years?
Well, if this was like a futuristic society that put them there, I'm assuming this version of plastic would last a very long time.
I guess we'll never know. We'll never know.
Well, that's the frustrating thing, is a lot of these are just going to remain unresolved.
See, you guys say that, but I don't think so. A lot of people love to say that George would rather write more world building than he would finish the story. And it's starting to kind of seem that way, because I feel as though we're probably going to get Fire and Blood Volume 2 before we get Winds of Winter at this point.
Oh my god, are you serious?
Oh.
He loves his world building, and quite frankly, I like it too, but I would also still rather have the story as well. So,
right. I guess it's just like we're forced to just think that the world building is becoming the story, that like, okay, is the post-apocalyptic, is a post-apocalyptic nature of Westeros a plot point, or is it just some random thing that he wrote?
Right. Like the whole thing with like the fish people, the squishers.
Yeah.
It seems like that, like it's too late in the story for something like that to be explained. Like it's just window dressing at this point.
Right, unless there's some grand unified theory on why both squishers and others and whatever exists, in Essos that's similar, unless they all came from the same thing,
The ecological engineering core, the golden theta.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Something like that,
They're Mockmen or whatever. I'm trying to think of all the Thousand Worlds stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's the thing about George, is that a lot of his stuff, I feel like he needs, this might be me reading in, but he needs like scientific explanations for things. So I remember reading the World Book, and I made a YouTube video about this, and it was inspired by your geology of Game of Thrones. And it was about sort of like the anthropology of Game of Thrones, like so in the World Book they describe that there's sort of multiple humanoid races in the world. There's humans, there's giants, there's children of the forest, there's the Ibonese, and then there's like the brindled men. And the World Book like takes an oddly specific amount of time going into like details about each one of them. Specifically, like if each race can interbreed with other races. Like it describes how like the humans and the Ibonese can interbreed, but they only produce like sterile offspring. But so
they're beginning to diverge as species, but began as you know, like I guess it's like us and the Neanderthals or whatever, right?
Yeah,
like we could interbreed,
right? Like that's exactly the point that I made, was that like the world seems like it's like our world, but if like these, so in reality in our world, like there were several branches of humans that all coexisted at once, that they probably were like separate races. But in this world, like in A Song of Ice and Fire, they continued to exist into like the Middle Ages, it seems. It's cool.
Yeah, I recently heard something that the biological diversity between chimpanzees is like insanely high compared to the biological diversity of human beings. That like we killed off all of our or interbreeded with all of our similar relatives, while like chimpanzees didn't, you know. That's interesting though.
Yeah,
you know, to get to the point where we can't breed anymore.
Yeah, it's that I guess the Ibonese are like more isolated. I guess they're on their island. The brindled men, he also brings up the brindled men where like they always produce like stillborns, so they can't even have infertile offspring with humans. So they're a separate species, according to like the speciation rules or whatever. So it's weird. So my point is that like George like he makes it seem like evolution exists in his world. And there's like a scientific basis for the stuff. Like, I read Fever Dream recently, and so vampires are in Fever Dream, but they're not really vampires. They seem to be like a branch of humans that evolved separately. They can't reproduce with humans. There's like a whole bunch of stuff with that. So George has like this really scientifically minded stuff, like even fantasy elements he has to explain through science sometimes.
Yeah, I mean it's hard. Like I do wonder if you can actually like beat out the sci-fi author in him. Like, you know, he hasn't really been a sci-fi author since the early 80s, but at the same time it was like so ingrained in him to think about the world in a biological sense, you know, because he did so many stories about bioengineering. That when he took on vampires, a completely fantastical plot, that he decided to make it scientific.
Yeah,
it's right.
Oh, sorry, you go first.
Like those vampires are no different than I mean, a little further than Neanderthals, but like because I don't think they can have children with human beings, but they're not separate. They're related, right? They came about over time through evolution. Yeah.
Yeah, he brings up like how like they existed in like he gives like a whole past to the vampires, like a prehistory, and how they would have coexisted with humans. That story specifically made me. So Fever Dream was interesting, where like you see a lot of elements of A Song of Ice and Fire. Like he borrows a lot of reuses a lot of characters a lot of times.
There's a lot of talk of like the bat and the wolf and things like that in that story, and weird stuff, and the feel of the vampires is just very like House Bolton. You know, a lot of the just like it's hard not to think about that when you're reading it, you know.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder about like the others, like if they're supposed to be like a branch of humans. I know like the show really kind of showed that they really played into the magic side. Part of me is holding out that it's not going to go that direction. I don't know.
Yeah, my original thought before the show was that, you know, if there were a nuclear war, they went underground, they evolved or genetically modified themselves to tolerate cold, and then they're living like that, but they're having bottleneck reproduction problems, and so they need like fresh genes every once in a while to like produce more, which is like, you know, the whole plot of like dying of the light and things like that. And all of his interregnum stuff, you know, people going underground and then interbreeding and then, or inbreeding and then becoming biologically different.
Yeah. No, yeah, I definitely agree with that. Where I want that I like that explanation because it seems very fitting. I do like the sort of conspiracy that not conspiracy, but the idea that he what's that story? 7 times never kill man. That the children of the forest are actually like evil, or they're gonna betray humanity.
Yeah, they're just tricking us the whole time.
Yeah,
with their visions.
I like that. Like, that's the thing is, like, you bring up how like George writes, like, people say that like your like theories are too conspiracy, they're too crazy, but like his stories are just filled with really, really bizarre ideas and concepts.
Right. Like if I were to say like, oh, you know, perhaps somebody's a cross-gender clone that's uploaded their consciousness into a computer. You know, you'd be like, what are you talking about? I'm like, no, that's George. You know, like that's the kind of thing he writes. That's the other thing is that, like, as dark as Ice and Fire is, like, some of his other writing is also like so dark.
Oh yeah, Fever
like,
Dream
oh
was
God.
like Fever Dream was really disturbing. Like one scene like really sticks out to me. Like the what's the villain's name? Damon Julian. He's like a sadist, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is really dark. Or what's the other stuff that he wrote that really sticks out in my head? I don't know. There's just a lot of like violence and people are really evil in the stories. Like, they're just cruel to be cruel. Think of the Brave Companions, like, where they're just like absurdly sadistic, and it's like everybody. It's like a huge amount of people.
How would any human being be like that? Fever Dream is also very special in that he spends so much time in the villain, not Damon Julian's head, but his assistant, the human.
Sour Billy.
Yeah, Sour Billy. That he spends so much time in Sour Billy's head, and you like really understand and almost sympathize with what like, even though he's a horrible, pathetic, racist, like guy, you spend so much time in his head that you're just like, oh my God, this poor thing.
Yeah,
this poor fucking thing.
I thought he was going to turn good. There was one part where I thought he was going to be turned into a good guy. I was like, oh yeah, he's going to join the good guys. He's not.
No, like right until the end. Like even after he's told to his face, you will never be a vampire. We were lying to you. He still like believes he's becoming a vampire. Like Am
I allowed to spoil Fever Dream, or is that okay?
I think so. We spoil stuff constantly when people get angry at us, and we're just like,
my favorite part of Fever Dream was when like Sour Billy just gets gunned down. Like, I like literally cheered at that part. That was like so fucking good.
And then you think he's dead, and then he's not.
He's still alive. He's still alive. He's.
And you almost believe it. Like, it's such a beautiful book in that sense, because like when he comes back and he believes he's becoming vampire, you almost believe it, because you're like, he was just gunned down. Maybe he really is becoming a vampire. No. Like, how did he survive that? Oh, it's just he just has such like rage and desire inside him, or you know, for this one thing that it's like kept him going.
Oh, I liked Fever Dream. It was good because I like George's endings. Like, he always has like he knows when to stop a story, I feel like.
He does. He's not scared. He knows how to do an ending. I would say that the thing about Fever Dream specifically is that I could understand how a big audience would hate that ending, because he builds it up like we're going to get Fever Dream, the boat, back working again, and we're going to have this huge rumble at the end, and it's going to be glorious. And you're expecting this Hollywood ending where they get the ship back and they have like some huge rumble of humans versus vampires, and they arrive and like the ship is, you know, pathetically run down and on land, and it's just like a couple people fighting Like it's really small. It's much more realistic. Like, no, he wasn't gonna. You thought you were gonna restore that boat? That's ridiculous. like
it's been on land for 13 years. You're not gonna get that thing back in there,
right? You know, so it's a much more realistic ending. But I could see how it's like, you know, a letdown for people. And I even think about the end of the show of Jon not being the hero and everybody being so upset that Jon was not the hero. And it being like, I'm not sure if like in the book, Arya is going to jump out of nowhere and kill the Night's King. But I was pretty sure that Jon wasn't the hero and that was a big diversion. But so many people were so disappointed with the fact that Jon didn't get to fight the Night's King in one big boss battle, you know? And I was like, but that's so George. It's so George to not have the hero fight in one big boss battle.
Yeah, that's why like Jon's such a weird character, because when you take Fever Dream and the main character is this like huge, fat, like ugly.
It's George R.R. Martin, right? The main character is George R.R. Martin, right?
Foul mouthed, he like curses all the time. And like he's not the albino, the vampire guy. What was his name?
Now I'm forgetting all of these things.
His friend, the other hero, like
who he's like in love with, right? Yeah.
He feels like that should be the main, in a traditional story, that would be the main character.
Yeah.
But in George's work, the main characters are like the weirdos, like the people who are not perfect. But you like learn to really like Abner Marsh is the main character's name. You really learn to like him because he's relatable, and you sympathize.
Yeah. Joshua. Joshua, Abner are on one side, and then Damon and Sour Billy on the other. And that's the thing, is he always likes to have these very different types of protagonists, whether it be, you know, a tall, genetically engineered black woman be his hero, or a fat riverboat guy be his hero. It's really weird to have Jon Snow as currently the hero. Like, it's just so odd. Because George is super liberal, so it's weird that he has this, you know, heteronormative cis, you know, white male as like the guy, which, you know, and so in the end when I saw the show and I was like, well, they did kind of like ruin him. Like, he was kind of more of a problem than a solution in the end, you know, like his deal with Daenerys caused issues rather than solutions. It's not like everybody was like, you're the son of Rhaegar, yay, we're all going to unite behind you. Like, it was more of a problem than anything. I think George once also said, the Ice and Fire, the hero has died before the story's begun. I assume he was referring to Rhaegar when he said that.
But Rhaegar's like kind of like a piece of shit, though. Like
he is, but I do wonder if like Rhaegar's only a piece of shit because we've like analyzed the book enough.
Oh yeah.
Because Rhaegar is very Joshua, right?
Yeah.
You know, like when you read Fever Dream, like Joshua and Rhaegar like sound like the exact same character.
Yeah. They're like the cool guy that's got a good heart that everybody really likes.
He's beautiful. He wants to reform the group for a better future. It's actually the same kind of character in Dying of the Light too, where his ex-girlfriend is seeing the new guy, and he's this like beautiful man who is actually super liberal, who wants to like reform his people and bring them into a new future, but you know, can't. Because he's not, I guess, ruthless or savvy or something. You know, there's always that kind of aspect to it. There's a weakness to these like beautiful, intelligent, you know, would-be leaders.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing is, like, in those characters I find, like, boring. Like, I like it when George writes these really bizarre point of view chapters. My favorite chapter to read is Victorian's chapters, because they're just so, you see how toxic and just horrible he is. How, like, broken his mind is. Like, he has, like, such just, like, a horrible view on the world in general, like, how everything works. But he's fascinating.
And how, like, he comes to these, like, ridiculous conclusions that are almost laughable, you know. And it's the same. I mean, it's the same with Cersei and the same with Aeron. Like, they're such fascinating characters to write and to read. That's why I almost say to people, like, oh man, wouldn't it be great if Jon stayed dead and, like, the story was really taken over by all of the new characters that he introduced in A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons, like his new characters are so much more flawed than his initial characters.
Yeah, and the flaws make them interesting. They make them, you kind of, like, want them to redeem themselves somehow, or just see how they'd react to situations.
Yeah, like I mean, my favorite character is Theon, and I mean, my favorite point of view character. Obviously, my favorite character is Sweet Robin, but my sister is reading the book for the first time, and I tell her this stuff, and she's like, but Theon's like a complete jerk. And I'm like, yeah, that's what makes him interesting. Like, or Sweet Robin is this, like, spoiled little kid, and you're like, yeah, he actually acts like a kid. Like, give the kid a break. Like, his mom got killed and he's being raised by Littlefinger. Like,
he's, like, throwing porridge at people and stuff.
Yeah, he's great. But yeah, when you think of, like, the original 8, you know, Ned, Catelyn, Sansa, Arya, Tyrion, Dany, Jon, like, yeah, you know, some of them are, like, Arya is becoming more and more psychotic over time. Dany perhaps is we don't know yet. I mean, in our story, she's not really becoming psychotic yet, despite her actions in A Storm of Swords, because she's much more sane all of a sudden in A Dance with Dragons. So I'll say that she's not becoming insane yet.
She's really boring in A Dance with... here's my opinion. I think Jon and Dany's chapters are so boring in Dance.
Oh, this is what people say, like, the A Feast for Crows is people you don't care about doing interesting things, and Dance with Dragons is people you do care about doing nothing.
They, like, literally sit on their ass for, like, the entire book.
Yeah. Jon, Dany, like, and Tyrion sits on a boat. Like, you know, like, that's it.
Like, the only thing that's interesting is, like, the cultures around them.
Yeah,
like,
it's world building again.
Yeah, like when you see the Giscari or the Yunkai, or the cultures beyond the wall are kind of interesting, I guess. Yeah.
Like, I mean, I remember my first read of Dance, and the Giscari characters, all their names sound the same, and you don't really differentiate them, and you kind of end up like Barristan. You, like, think Barristan's awesome, and you finish the book, and then but you read it a second time, and you're like, actually, Barristan's an idiot, and these Giscari characters are actually very different and nuanced.
Okay, here's my conspiracy theory, is that George inserted the whole Giscari plot as this is just me. I might be wrong. As a response to, like, the U.S. invasion of Iraq and our involvement in the Middle East.
It certainly feels that way.
Like, where Barristan's, like, George Bush or something like that. I don't know. That might be me looking in, where he oversimplifies cultures. And, yeah.
It's impossible not to read that and think that, right? Like, and I think George has been asked that, and he's denied it, and he's just like, no, it's a general parable. When you're like, okay, well, if you insert Vietnam, like, is it any different than, like, it's just supposed to represent any colonial power, and you're like, okay, if you put it in a general sense, but it's impossible when, like, the book comes out in 2011 and we're in the middle of Iraq and she's in this, like, and she's in the stand-in for the Middle East.
She just got rid of the government and is now in charge, but doesn't understand any of the intricacies.
Right. Is facing terrorist attacks from like, you know, an insurgents. Like it's really difficult to be like, come on.
Well,
you're right. Like
it's weird that like the Giscari aren't brought up at any point in like the first book. They're barely mentioned. I don't even know if they're mentioned that much in Clash of Kings either. But then they become this huge part of the story by swords. Storm of Swords.
Yeah, the only thing that's mentioned are Unsullied are mentioned fairly early, but I don't think I'm trying to think. They do say Slaver's Bay. He does. Slaver's Bay is mentioned by Jorah after I'm trying to remember if it's after
Drogo's death.
I think it might even be before Drogo's death. He all of a sudden, it's maybe after. Oh, it's after the wine cellar incident.
Oh, really?
Drogo is suddenly pro-war, and so Jorah says, "Hey, we can just make for Slaver's Bay and then head west." And it doesn't happen. You know, like,
it's always interesting to go back and see what was set up and what's sort of been retconned.
Oh yeah,
because I like, so every now and then, so I make my circuit of because I have them on audiobook, and it's just like, it's like comforting to me for some reason to listen to George R. R. Martin and his awkward sex scenes and stuff. And you'll pick up on this stuff like and you're able to be like this shows that I'm like a super nerd, but like that in the first book, let's think in the first book, he brings up that like Doran Martell, Joffrey like is demanding fealty, and he brings up that Doran Martell and his sons need to come here and swear fealty, which doesn't make any sense when you bring into the fact that does he have two sons, and then his eldest daughter. He has two
sons, but it's like his daughter is the one that's like really the one that should be doing fealty, right?
And there's like clear retcons that he made, like the economy, the economy of Westeros, like how he gives away, so at the hand's tourney they give away like thousands and thousands worth of dragons.
Yeah, and like no one could carry that, you know, and like how is Anguy the Archer and the Hound not like immediately like lords and like the wealthiest people in it?
There's like, there must be really what's the not inflation, the opposite of inflation.
Deflation. But it's funny because they say Anguy the Archer like loses all his money at like brothels, and it's like, how much were you paid? Like, he could have had sex with a different woman every day for 20 years, and you wouldn't have gotten like the amount of money that Anguy won.
I guess that does happen. So I've been making a video. It's called I don't know when it's going to be out because it's going to take a while, but it's called like the economy of Alexander the Great, or I think I'm going to call it just like the tax policy of Alexander the Great. A little nod to like George when he wanted to know Aragorn's tax policy or whatever. Where I went to the ancient accounts and just like sifted through them to figure out like how much money was spent, like how did the economy sort of work, and it's crazy. Like so a talent, so in the ancient world, they had talents of silver. It was mainly silver based. They had talents of silver. They had drachmas, which were these coins. And so a talent of silver was like 6,000 drachmas. And one drachma was like the sort of daily payment of like a soldier. Like he earns a drachma a day. When you go into like the ancient accounts and they break down, like, so Alexander had so people are going to get upset with me. He had a boyfriend. He had the accounts say he had a friend, but it's pretty clear that it was a little bit closer than that.
Sure, it's Greek culture, you know. This is just
and he spent like 10,000, like according to the accounts, and who knows if they're reliable, 10,000 to 12,000 like talents on the funeral. And so what I did is I multiplied that out and tried to figure out, and like it's insane. Like I don't know, I did math, and like it's so stupid. Where like with that equivalent amount of money, like he could have bought. So then I looked at like how much a pig would have cost in that time. He could have bought the entire world population of pigs with that amount of money. It's like, it's insane.
There's some really fascinating economic articles about like ancient economies, and actually deflation was a serious problem. So for instance, like when you're talking about like soldiers' salaries, they'll check like the soldier's salary we mentioned in one account, and then 300 years later, they'll find that the soldier's salary is not that much more, and they determine that the interest rate or the inflation rate was, a fraction of 1% back then, which is a real serious problem. Which and so they're like, well, how did the ancient world deal with the fact that they were dealing with, microinflation or deflation? And they actually say that the reason that all of these monuments exist in the ancient world is that it was a way, because you couldn't just print money, like because it was all coin based, like you can't just print more money like we do today. So the way that they would try to get money back into the economy and employing people, because there was just massive unemployment, was to create monuments, and that monuments were mostly social work. And so, I think historically people write, oh, they spent all this ruler spent all of this money on himself. Like, oh, he built this huge statue to himself, or he built a Colosseum. And in fact, it was more, well, there's a lot of unemployed people and we need to somehow put the money back in the economy. And therefore we're going to like build these monuments. And that actually, like, the times where the most monuments are built are actually the worst time for their economy. It doesn't really, like, sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, there's so many monuments to this emperor, he must have been really popular. No, the economy was just really bad during his period of time.
I have not heard that. I'll have to incorporate that in the video. That's actually really interesting.
Like look it up sometime about like ancient Roman or ancient Greek deflation and like how they dealt with it. It was really fascinating kind of ideas, because it makes you rethink all of these monuments, that it's not to the arrogance of these rulers, but it's actually like a necessity of just how their economies and how their systems work.
Wow, that's really cool, because like a lot of the sources are really negative on certain emperors because of like their spending and stuff. Like Caligula gets crap for building like giant boats or moving obelisks and stuff, but it might actually be that he was trying to help the economy, is kind of an interesting perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was pretty obsessed with the Julio Claudians. So like Caligula, Nero, like I'm always like, did they really deserve like the bad rap that they got? And it's like, well, I think by modern standards, yes, but like by ancient standards, they were all that bad. So like, I don't understand why, like they kind of say like Caligula, they say, oh, he was such a murderer, he killed so many people. And it's like, actually Caligula killed just as many people per year as Augustus or Claudius, or he had just as many assassination attempts as like per year as like Augustus or Claudius. Like everybody was always trying to kill the emperor, and he was always killing people right and left. Like there was no difference. It's just that Caligula actually got had his little, they had their little Senate coup and everything, and was actually overthrown. Like he actually lost because he was pretty young. I don't think he was probably very savvy.
Yeah. That's interesting when it goes into A Song of Ice and Fire, with how like a lot of Targaryen kings are depicted in the histories.
Oh, like Mad King Aerys himself, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, with him at least we do have like the Jaime perspective on things. But yeah, like I do wonder about like what the true motivations of, say, Maegor the Cruel or Aegon the Unworthy were in what they were doing, and was it really madness, or were they onto something?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because everything's, I mean, Nero, like Nero becomes this huge anti-Christian figure and is just is bashed forever, and people claim that like he burned down Rome, even though Rome started on fire like every day. Like there's a fire in Rome. There's a fire in Rome every day. He gets blamed for that because the history survives of some historian that lived 150 years after him. But you know, there's not necessarily that much, there's not some other surviving account. The archaeology maybe can tell us something, like how I think they found some like pillars of like the extent of his fire, or the fire that happened during his reign. But, there's fires like 2 years later, under a few years later under Titus. So it's funny stuff with all of that. It makes me wonder about, actually, because I'm about to start a series where I go through Fire and Blood, just Rogue Prince and Princess and the Queen stuff, preparing for House of the Dragon. But like George specifically writes that from multiple perspectives,
right?
So that you're not supposed to know what really happened. But now we're going to see stuff on screen, like with our own eyes.
It's gonna jade people, I think, or not jade people, but alter the perspectives that some people might have had.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, because how Fire and Blood is written is almost exactly like how like Roman history is written, where you'll have like certain sources and each one of them has like their own biases, and you can't really trust it. And you're right that kind of makes it interesting. It makes it a little frustrating too that you don't know exactly what happened. But
yeah, like if you read Suetonius or Tacitus, you kind of realize that okay, they have Agrippina's diary apparently had survived at least long enough for these historians. We don't have it today. And then we have like there's a few really bad historians, like one named Fabius Rusticus, who they're just like, well, he just liked to write about sex and violence, and like he's the only one that survives, and then they're all basing their stuff off Fabius Rusticus, and they're and under the new dynasty was big into trashing the old dynasty, the Flavians, right? So yeah, he gets some. I'm not saying that Nero wasn't a dick. I'm just saying they were all dicks.
Well, that's the thing, is that like people wanted there to be like a king of Westeros and stuff by the end of the series. At least some people, like I'm assuming like the dude bros wanted like Jon to be the king. He marries Daenerys, and you're right that like it's not a fix, because like it's the system of Westeros itself that's broken.
Yeah,
they need to just completely remove the royalty and inheritance, because that's the problem. Like when I think about what needs to be sort of resolved by the end of the story, it's sort of like the constant fighting and that Westeros is sort of stuck in the Middle Ages for thousands and thousands of years. Like I feel like that should be the focus of like how the story is going to be resolved. Like, is there going to be like a new beginning for the people of Westeros?
Yeah. By the way, it just occurred to me that Aerys is freaking Nero. Like, it just occurred to me. I can't believe I've never thought of that.
That's what I noticed when I read through it. Like, Maegor the Cruel is a bit of like Ivan the Terrible and Caracalla, like a sort of a late Roman emperor, kind of mixed together. Joffrey's a little bit of like Caligula. I kind of got from him.
Yeah.
Like the depiction of Caligula, like maybe like Caligula in what's that movie?
The one I think it's called Caligula.
It's just Caligula.
the one that got the X rating, the one with the guy from Clockwork Orange.
Yes, yeah. That's what destroys me when you learn a lot of history. You'll read this and like you'll be like, oh God, George, you're just borrowing this stuff.
Right.
Like,
and then he borrows from himself, and you're like, oh, geez. Well, I mean, I guess it's not plagiarism if it's like from himself. It's.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
I'm looking at my list. I made a list a while ago. Hadrian's Wall is the Great Wall. He kind of like, or Hadrian's Wall is the wall. Yeah, that kind of shows up. I interpreted like the White Walkers at one point as like the Black Death, where like they're like this sort of existential. When they describe, so there's one point where they describe like old Nan's telling a story that like both nobles and peasants died in their castles and stuff of the White Walkers.
Oh right, yeah.
There's a like sort of Middle Ages description of like the Black Death, and that's explicitly described that like the Black Death was indiscriminate in who it killed. So it made me wonder if they're like, if it's almost like a metaphor for that. But again, that's me reading into stuff.
Yeah, he's mentioned global warming as a possible metaphor, but at the same time, like I sat next to a woman who asked him specifically, like, are the others actually evil, or are like, or is there something more? Are they more? Is there more nuance to like who they are? And he said, "You're gonna have to keep reading. I can't tell you."
Okay,
You know,
there's something.
so like, yeah, that's something, which is funny because you know. Yeah, I could see it either way with George. It's not like he doesn't have stories where he has completely evil characters, and it's not like he doesn't have stories where they're nuanced. And it's like, when I watched the end of the show, it's not like I couldn't see a lot of George R. R. Martin in that ending. Because, as you said, like the problem was feudalism and and heredity, and they do solve that at the end. They're going to elect kings. Like it's some sort of semi-democratic like system at the end. It's not popular democracy. And it's not like there's terms, but they're at least electing kings, and that's a slight improvement over having divine right. And so it's like I kind of like there are elements where I'm just like, that sounds a little bit like George, or like I would say it's an incredibly dumb idea about how like what binds us together, stories.
Oh yeah.
Like I think that's really stupid, but at the same time, I could see George writing that. It's a little like it's a little outside of the box for D&D, right? Like, that like, So I'm like, was that his line? Like, I don't think it's true at all. I think armies keep us together.
I feel like if he has any like that stuff will be fleshed out more, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what they say is like maybe like you could take these bad ideas, and if you give it enough time and enough explanation, then maybe it'll all work out. How it's executed. Because like you and I both liked Fever Dream, but I don't know if structurally. Like if someone told me that structure for the story, I'd be like, this story wouldn't work.
Yeah. Well, I thought when they did like the time skip in Fever Dream, I thought it was just literally going to end with Jonathan running away and they never saw each other again.
Yeah.
And I was like, that feels like a George ending to really, because he has this ambiguous endings a lot where there's not everything's answered. There's some hope, but sometimes there's not hope. It's always like it could go one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, he likes the bittersweet. So the fact that the character is dead at the end, and it's like, yeah, he died of old age, like or whatever. And he's at his like, but still, you're supposed to be sad because you're at the grave, and it's supposed to feel sad. I think he wanted that feeling, like a sadness, because it's a happy ending. Like they kill the evil vampires, and they kill the evil vampires and the protagonists survive. And you're like, that would be too much of a happy ending. So let's fast forward to one of the characters' funerals.
He's dead.
To make it sad. I guess that was that.
Oh, by the way, I wanted to tell you that so I remember you had your theory, I don't know if it was your theory or you're just one of the proponents of it, the Battle of Blood theory.
Yeah. That's for the most part mine. Yeah. I'm pretty proud of that one.
Somebody asked George at a con if they're ever going to see. This was a while ago. There's like a database that keeps track of all the questions people ask him because we're crazy. And they asked him, or something along the lines that like, are we ever going to see krakens in the story itself, like living krakens? And he said possibly. It's just one word answer, but I was like, oh dang. Preston might be right.
I think it just has too many neat parallels to what's going on like in the North and stuff like that. Like if we, I mean, I'm making a big assumption. Making the big assumption that everybody's gonna fall in that lake. Because they spent so much time like making holes in the lake that I feel like somebody's got to fall in that lake. And so if they're getting pulled into the lake in up there, it seems like some people are going to be pulled down into the water down south. I'm just thinking of ways that like how is Euron going to win this battle? Like He needs something. He needs some X factor to come in.
He can't just die. He can't just die. They set up this cool badass character and then he just disappears.
It's like, yes, and then he was immediately wiped out by the red wine and Hightower fleets, and that was the end. You're like, oh, okay.
I wanted to ask you, what is your, and you don't have to answer this, what is your theory? Do you have a theory or any idea what the faceless men are doing in the Citadel? Like, I'm like just completely at a loss for what the where that story is going.
So I thought about that a lot, and I might have thought about it a little too much. Because, like, some people say, well, why was Jaqen even in the Black Cells? Doesn't that seem a little weird that he was there? Like, who is he trying to get to in King's Landing, that he would even be in the Black Cells in the first place? What's his connection to Rorgan Biter and things like that? And I don't know if George thought all of that through. I came up with some explanations on why he would be in the Black Cells. I think it was that he wanted to go to the Wall at some point. And so I kind of came up with this idea that he was after Bloodraven.
Yeah.
That he was hired by the Golden Company to go after, and the agents of Bittersteel to go after Bloodraven to take him out, and that he was in Old Town to find the glass candle to help him find Bloodraven or something like that.
That's a cool idea.
A lot of people
I like that idea.
A lot of people believe he's going for the dragon tome, that he wants to get the key to go get the book on the dragons, so that the faceless men know how to kill dragons, because as slaves they were against the Valerians or something. But this is like based on a lot of speculation, because I've got to be like, okay, like there are these coins where they can't recognize the face of the king on them. Both Pate is given a coin where he doesn't know the king, and Arya at the House of Black and White has a coin where she doesn't know the king. And there's a scene in The Mystery Knight where Dunk looks at a coin and he has trouble figuring out the king, and then realizes that it's Daemon Blackfire, and that these are Blackfire coins.
Oh, dang.
And so this is my idea that the faceless men were being hired by the Golden Company and the Blackfire cause.
Well, and there's also the thing with Varys where he looks in the fire when he's cut, and a voice talks to him. That would be a good way to bridge that, if that's like Bloodraven speaking to him. I don't know.
That's true too. Oh man, I didn't think about that.
Because Melisandre can see Bloodraven in the fire. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. But of course, like, all of my ideas about time traveling Bran now screw that up, so I don't even know.
Time traveling Bran cut Varys? Is that going to be a theory?
Well, now it's like, has time traveling Bran done fucking everything? Has he done absolutely fucking everything? Like, I don't even know. I don't know. It's so hard now, because anybody could be sending these visions. So I don't even know if George knows. He just does something and then tries to figure it out later.
Because I don't know where he's going with Quaithe, like what Quaithe is going to be about. There's too many elements. There's a lot up in the air.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've come to the belief that, like, all of Dany's visions are caused by Quaithe. I'm just kind of accepted that. Maybe not the House of Black and White, or I mean the House of the Undying. Like, that might be something else. That might be time traveling Bran, but I think the dragon dreams and things like that all sound like they're Quaithe.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is like, it seems like Quaithe or somebody is like gaslighting Dany, where they're sending her visions, but she's misinterpreting them. She's like, she's constantly suspicious of what's that fucking dude's name?
Resnek Resnek, yeah.
And he's like the chillest
done nothing
dude.
Wrong. Resnek is like perfectly fine.
And she's like, this guy can't stand him, and Barristan hates him too for some reason.
I suppose that's supposed to mirror Cersei and Pycelle to some degree.
Yeah, because Pycelle's a genius in Feast for Crows. He like literally says everything right.
Yeah. And then no one listens to the
No one listens to him. He's like, don't release Wyman Manderly's son. Don't the Ironborn are not with Stannis. That doesn't make any sense. And she's just like,
don't default on your debt to the Iron Bank.
Oh God.
Oh man.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. There's a lot. This story, the Game of Thrones is so dense. The Song of Ice and Fire, there's just so much going on.
Oh, and it's just so fun.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is that the theorizing has been so fun over the years. And some people think like, oh, we're coming to the end. And I'm like, I don't know. There's still a lot more to talk about. Like I haven't, and hopefully eventually we'll get that sixth book. I don't know. But, everybody wonders if like we've overthought it. And I always say like, maybe we've overthought it, but even if like George thought about 10% of like what we've been theorizing about, I'd be impressed. I'd be like, that's pretty great. That makes it more complicated than anything else.
Yeah, because you're right. There's so many people theorizing. Like there's got to be a certain percentage that gets it actually right. I know that like there's a post where people like ask like theories that actually turned out to be true. And one person actually was able to guess that Bloodraven was the three-eyed crow.
Yeah,
pretty cool.
Yeah, that's brought up, and people are like, "That's just." I mean, it was kind of just dumb luck, I think, because I mean, Blood. I think it was recently after. I'm trying to think when the Mystery Knight came out. The Mystery Knight came out after. Dance with Dragons. So I'm trying to think of when
he's brought up.
Maybe it was. Oh, it might have been in the Sworn Sword had come out.
Oh yeah, you're right.
And it's like such a weird thing,
because they talk about him like with his evil sister girlfriend, and that they work together. Oh yeah, you're right. Because the Duncan Egg books are weird, where the first one doesn't mention the Blackfire Rebellion at all. Like there's no indication that it ever happened.
That's right.
Even though it should be like really big deal that all these houses are together that were just recently at war, and then he introduces it in the next book.
Yeah, there's some discussion about like what George knew in the beginning, and when he came up with the idea of Blackfires, and it's pretty clear that in the first book of Game of Thrones, he knows he's going to have a story about Targaryen disputes over the bloodline of who rules. Like that's pretty clear that that's in the story, but the fact that he's going to have both the Dance of the Dragons, with the blacks and the greens, and then the Blackfires as two separate disputes, is not really like fleshed out yet.
Yeah.
But he definitely, like from the beginning, knew that there was going to be some sort of second Targaryen causing a problem. So I think from the beginning he knew that Aegon was going to be a plot line. But then everyone's like, well, when did he come up with the Blackfires? It's tough. The minute you invent Bloodraven as a character, it's tough not because Bloodraven is based on Michael Moorcock's character of Elric, and so like once you bring in Elric, you're going to bring in Elric's like foil, who is the Moriarty. It's like bringing in Sherlock Holmes. Like you're going to bring in Moriarty if you're going to bring in Sherlock Holmes. Like, and so Bittersteel and the Blackfire cause like kind of come along with Bloodraven the minute you come up with Bloodraven, but he didn't have Bloodraven's idea in the first book. Trying to think. Let's see how often he even mentions Bloodraven and Storms.
I think he mentions Blackfires, like Catelyn brings up Blackfires when she's talking to Robb about like succession disputes or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he's an interesting writer where like he expands as he writes. Like he just fleshes more and more out, and there's just more details and stuff.
Yeah, he calls it gardening, where he'll put down 10 ideas and then he'll build on one of them, And then everyone's like, oh my God, he planted that seed in the beginning. What a genius. And no one thinks about the other 9 dropped plots.
What's the one that you always bring up? The Faith of the Seven fanatics?
Yeah, there are these religious end-world religious zealots that are clearly like part of a Clash of Kings.
Al-Ardim?
Yeah, well, Al-Ardim is also another one where like you mention his name a whole bunch and then he just disappears and then he's just dead. And the Faith of the Seven, the end-world zealots, which are, they're arrested, they're clearly sent to the wall, and then they just disappear. But there's a few of those so far. Like Janice Slint's companions have also kind of disappeared, because he was sent to the wall with a whole bunch of people, and that are supposedly loyal to the crown. So we'll see if they kind of pop up. But the thing is, it's not a dropped plot until the story's over. Yeah. Because, I mean...
POV chapter, Al-Ardim.
You're right. Like, we have no clue if he's going to come back to it.
What if he's the last epilogue character, Al-Ardim is the POV?
Oh my God. That'd be such an incredible story. Here I am at the wall. The story's over.
Trying to think of anything else that was dropped or anything like that.
I'm trying to think anything that comes to mind really quick. I mean, sometimes he'll reference stuff.
Right, he'll bring it up and you'll be like, what?
like Simon Silvertongue, which is kind of this, random side plot of A Clash of Kings, where, the singer comes and, once finds out about Tyrion and Shay, and wants to expose Tyrion, or wants a bribe, and so Tyrion instead tells Bronn to murder the guy and then put him in the bowl of brown, to deal with him, and whether Bronn actually did that, who knows, but. You think, okay, that's just like a plot line we never have to think about again. And then he brings it up in A Dance with Dragons, this like cannibalism in soup kind of idea, which is clever that he brought it up because the werewood paste with Jojen happens around the same time. So your mind is primed to think about cannibalism as you're like reading Bran's story about eating this bowl of blood that he, that looks really creepy. And so it's like, was that a plan from the beginning?
That's actually really clever.
And he even calls it singer stew because he was a singer and the children of the forest are singers.
Oh my God.
It's very clever. It's incredibly clever.
And you're like, is this intentional? You're like, this is really smart.
Right. When he shoved Simon Silvertongue into a bowl of brown back in A Clash of Kings, was he really thinking that because he wrote that in 1997, was he really thinking that in 2011, 14 years later, that he was going to use that pun of having having singer stew being 2 different bowls of cannibalism? Like, it's fucking like, it's bravo. Or did he have the singer in the bowl of brown and then he was just like, oh, this is lucky, Or maybe he didn't think about it at all and I just came up with the connection.
Yeah. Maybe he's like, yeah, sure, that's a connection right there.
Right. Like there's so many moments where I'm like, man, he's so smart, and then other moments where I'm like, maybe I'm overthinking this. Maybe he's not that smart. I don't know.
That's awesome.
Oh man. Oh, so any other let's see, I'm trying to think of any we've gone through all of the there's one thing that I put on my list here that I don't know if you know anything about this.
Okay.
I think Jamie in either Feast for Crows or Dance with Dragons starts talking about towers. And whether towers are like circular or square.
Oh yeah. That's in a dance when he talks about. It stuck out to me. He talks about the Raven Tree Castle.
Yeah, and how that they didn't know how to make circular towers, and so everything was square back then. But then like everything in the north is round from like thousands of years ago,
right?
And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. But is that from real life? Is that true in real life that they didn't know how to make circular towers?
It very well might be, because he mentions that his wording really stuck out in my head, where he's like, these towers predated that particular bit of wisdom or something. That like, and I think it has to do with that catapults and like boulders and stuff, like there'll be less on like a round thing, they'll create less damage, I guess. It will distribute the force differently.
Yeah,
and that might be
square
something.
One would take all of the impact.
Yeah. And I have never really read that in real life. But you're right. And George puts a lot of effort into, I remember the World Book bringing up a lot about the Winterfell art, like how Winterfell's built, and that there's older segments and newer segments and stuff. And that the older ones, you're right, are the round towers. That's very odd. Yeah. You're right. That's a weird thing to set up. Really, really strange.
Yeah, no, I mean, I found that this is like, like a real thing in military history, and that even though sometimes they're vulnerable, they like some people still just kept building them. I imagine they're much cheaper, and you can just build them faster or something. But yeah, this idea of everything in the north with these round towers being out of place. And it's such a weird piece of history that Jamie would be talking about as well.
Yeah, you never really got the impression that Jamie was like a guy that was into history. It was always Tyrion.
Right, and then all of a sudden it's there. And I guess why bring that up at all? Did he just happen to read a book, or was he like planting a clue that yes, this is another thing of like archaeology showing a contradiction to history,
right? With that like Bran's taking this like modern idea of how to build towers into the past or something.
Yeah, maybe, because that's the thing, is like Bran is purposely going to the oldest tower and it falls from a round tower, right? And this is like a big part of his story.
Oh my gosh, he's going to build his own tower. What the hell?
I mean, maybe. I mean, I got some cool tower stuff coming up in the next Time Traveling Brand. Actually, hopefully this will come out after Time Traveling Brand, so I can bring this up now, because I mean, I just got to work on. But I think Brand is going to be coming out of a sinkhole, because they mentioned that like the back door of the Eye of the Three-Eyed Crow is down a sinkhole, and I was like, oh, a sinkhole is an inverted tower.
Oh, dang.
So Bran has all these dreams about falling from a tower. Was he really falling from a sinkhole?
Huh. That's really... Oh, there was another thing I wanted to tell you, too, in addition to the Kraken one. So this is just by chance. I was reading the World Book, and I remember watching your video about like how Daenerys, her birth doesn't make much sense, the whole storm.
Yeah.
If you read the World Book, there's actually a contradiction there where it brings up that like the most recent storm and living memory was, I don't know the exact dates, but if you look at it, it's before Daenerys is born, and it doesn't bring up the Daenerys storm at all.
Yeah, no, somebody else recently brought that up because they were trying to disprove me and say, no, there's this really great storm that is mentioned in the World Book. And then he's like, it totally proves your theory wrong. And I'm like, where is it? And then he brings up the quote and he's like, he's like, oh, sorry. This is from like, that storm happened like 80 years ago.
Right.
I guess this actually supports your theory. Never mind.
It's
cool.
It's like such a small detail that you're like, is that him saying that Dany's idea of her childhood is wrong? It's bizarre.
Yeah. But I was very impressed with the person that brought it forward, because they're just like immediately when they looked at the data, they're just like because most of the time when people are in arguments, like all of us do this, we like cling to like some sort of like notion and we try to shift our position. But he was just like, oh no, sorry, my bad.
He was like, oh crap, you're right, Preston.
Never mind. I was like, good for him, not being consumed by passion like the rest of us.
Yeah, so that's cool. That's actually a really good interaction. I'm happy that those happen still on the internet.
Yeah. Yeah, no, people are always surprising. There's always it's the funny thing. Like, I mean, you know this about having a channel. Like, you end up meeting some of the most interesting people and smartest people, and also like the craziest worst people. like the whole spectrum is out there. Like, at every moment, you're just impressed and horrified with the world.
Yeah,
you're just like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Oh man. Let's see. We've been talking for about an hour and 40. Do you want to wrap this up?
Yeah, sure.
Damn, you guys went on for a while, and in case everybody was wondering, I stayed quiet for majority of this, mainly because I know Preston was super excited to have Trey on, and I didn't want to interrupt or mess up the flow of the conversation and all that. But Trey, before I let you go, something I noticed about you, you're a young guy. When did you start your channel?
I started it back in 2000. When was my first video? 2013. So I've been doing this for, oh god, don't make me calculate this. 13. Oh god, I'm really bad at math.
That's 9 years.
9 years. Holy cow, that's really upsetting.
You started your channel 9 years ago. You don't have any videos from back then. Like, your Minecraft videos are all gone.
No, I was there was another thing. This is when I really started to get into science. Is I was really into BioShock, if you know what BioShock is.
Yeah, I do.
And I was like, science of BioShock, and it was me recording with like my internal microphone on my computer, so you could hear the fan going the whole time. Oh, those videos.
Oh, that's the way my first videos are too. So mine says pink letters from 7 years ago. Like, it was all on a laptop, and you could hear like when my laptop fan went on, and like every time I stopped recording, like you could hear my keyboard go click, you know.
Mm. Or you're using. I used Windows Movie Maker, and they have those preset fades and
good old Windows Movie Maker. Still the best. If only they could improve.
I used iMovie, which has like everything. Like it has also those preset like movements and transitions and stuff. But it's learned a little bit. So though some people are like, Preston, your videos haven't changed in their style in like years. I'm like,
yeah, that's me too. I get that all the time too, that my editing is like terrible, and I'm like, hey, I like doing it.
You do hit a wall. You're like, well, you can learn like one little new trick, but you can only use that one little new trick for like 1 second of one video.
Yeah. And
then it's done, and you can't use that trick again. So I don't know. You learn little things like efficiency wise and but for the most part, like, I don't know, doing some really cool blend, you're gonna use it once. And sometimes it's just not worth it. Like, should I spend like 30 minutes doing this like little edit, or should I just leave it? Like,
But no, Trey's a young guy, man, and I'm thoroughly impressed. When I met you 3 years ago, you had like 200,000 subscribers. I was telling this to Preston, and then all of a sudden you just blew up to 800,000. And Preston knows me well enough to know I don't say this often, but this success couldn't have happened to a better person. You're a very cool guy. You're super chill. You've been very nice to me so far, and you've always been just there with us in a sense in the comments, always hitting me up and giving me your thoughts. And this success, homie, we'll be here with you when you reach 1 million, hopefully very soon.
Oh, thank you so much. That really means a lot.
Yeah, and it's really great, and it's so impressive that also like you've got this like loyalty where if you post a video, that everybody's coming back. It's not like some people have channels where they have to like keep everybody's interest constantly because if they drop off for a weekend, all of a sudden they lose viewers. Like, you might disappear for a month or two, and you come back and it's like everybody's back.
Yeah.
Like, no.
Oh, it's so nice. I disappeared for 4 months last year. I didn't make a video. I didn't make a video like from August to December or something like that. And it's nice. It's nice because they know that, because like I've kind of built up a reputation that like whenever I make a video, it's going to be a good one. so people watch it, which is cool.
Well, you're like Nick Hodges in a sense from History Buffs. Like, you guys make, movie production, television level like content, and people are going to be there regardless. Me and Preston, we're just fucking around and doing whatever, and people come, people go. But for you, you got that audience there. Preston knows me. Whenever I meet a new YouTuber and I talk to them for the first time, I give them the usual spiel. What are you doing? What's going on? What's your Patreon? You got your business email set up? I always try to help people as best I can. Preston knows what I'm talking about. I give him the usual spiel, and
but that's an entire job in itself. Is like managing your social media is like it's so much time.
Yeah,
like to do all that. So yeah, that's why I'm so bad at it.
Me too. I like doing the research. That's like my favorite thing is to because I'm like nutty. Where like I'll like really really waste a lot of time on research. Like my one of my upcoming videos too. I'm looking at I'm looking into Bigfoot believers, and a claim that's often made is that Bigfoot exists in Native American folklore and like legends and stuff. And that's a big piece of evidence that Bigfoot is real. And I'm actually taking the time to like look at Native American like stories that were written in like the 1800s and stuff. And then also interviewing Native representatives about Bigfoot stuff, and it's like really funny where like you'll look back at it and these Bigfoot believers are just like totally taking quotes out of context, or you'll talk to the representatives and they're like yeah, we don't really like them. They're like
what I think is very interesting is with how the biased Western mind works, is how they'll weight certain things. Like for instance, when someone says like some hippie is like, man, in these people's like indigenous oral tradition, this and this like has been talked about, and that's been passed down for thousands of years. And you're like, how do you know it's been passed down for thousands of years if it's an oral tradition?
Right.
It could be one generation old. You have no fucking clue. Right. like you're just assuming that based on some sort of like mystical other myth that you have in your head, that these people are so good at passing down their oral traditions sitting around the fire. Like it's just not the way. Like, and they always talk about these things like, the way they've been doing it for thousands of years. You have no idea about these people's practices for thousands of years. They could have been migratory for a while and then settled down and were farmers for a while and then were migratory again and then built cities and then decided they weren't sustainable and then became migrants again. Like you have no clue.
Right.
And, like other cultures and primitive cultures, primitive quote, it's a dirty word, are just as dynamic and changing as, industrialized modern cultures. Like, so this brings back to Ice and Fire. Like a lot of people are like, they'll hear some, like they'll list something that are like, well, the maesters say this, but the singers say this. And like a reader will be like, oh, the singers said something. I guess that must be true. Or Old Nan said something. And you're like, well, why does Old Nan have any legitimacy?
Well, yeah. A lot of these Bigfoot stories are interesting too, where they'll have like the same anachronisms that we were talking about. Where there's one, so I bought a book. It was like it's Bigfoot Legends, and it's made by this lady. I don't want to call her out, but she's a Bigfoot believer, and you can tell that she's a Bigfoot believer because she's taken these stories that have nothing to do with Bigfoot and like makes them try to sound like Bigfoot. There's one called like the Iron Nosed or something like that. And it's like this cannibal guy that wears a mask with like an iron nose and he tries to eat people. And she says that that's Bigfoot. And like, no, it's not. He has an iron nose. Like, and also that story, like there's iron in it. And Native Americans before contact didn't make iron. So it's clear that this is a revision of some kind or at least influenced by later stuff. Yeah.
And he'll strike again.
To wrap this all up, guys, because we've been going for almost, 2 hours now?
Yeah. Sorry, I go on tangents.
No.
I mean, this is like me. This is like Mr. Tangent.
Yeah, that I know. Trey, would you like to come back like later on and, when the House of the Dragon comes back and do some more of these?
Oh, heck yeah. Yeah, I would love to. This was fun.
And Presto, you would be cool with that as well, right?
Yeah, sure. And you have an open invitation anytime if you're bored and you want to call in during any of my live streams, I'll give you my I'll give you my my address, and you can call in anytime you want, if you're busy or not, or whatever.
Okay, yeah, definitely. That'll be fun.
I've never heard Preston geek out so much when we have another person on.
Oh, talking about like history and everything? Yeah.
Talking about archaeology and paleontology and all that stuff, and the evolution and all that stuff, so...
It's the same here. Same with me. I like have very few people that I can talk to this stuff about, so it's been great.
Yeah, this has been really fun.
So, homie, hopefully we can have you back on. Once again, guys, thank you so much for joining us. As always, we'll see you all next time. Have a good one.